It begins with a general mobility, which starts to warm the body up in the very active type of longer, type of slower or gross movements, which really will happen first. Then we'll get into the more of the dynamic stuff after that. We start from the ground and work our way all the way up. We'll start at the feet, warm up the ankle, the calf, work our way to our quad and hamstring. Then we'll work our way up to the hips and the groin area. From that, we'll move from very short, longer movements to those dynamic movements which I just spoke about, such as the skipping and the hopping and the jumping, to really activate that nervous system, to turn on all those switches so your athletes are exactly fired up to where they need to be when they step on the field. The first two exercises in the warm-up are ankle mobility and hip mobility. These exercises are geared to give athletes something which they can use a lot of, both hip and ankle mobility. This exercise is done very simply by moving the athlete as close to the wall as possible, taking their foot and holding it about 2 inches away. The athlete will then take their knee and bring it as close to the wall as possible, 5 to 10 repetitions. They'll then repeat that to the left and to the right. The hip mobility is done pretty much the same way. The athlete will lean against the wall in the same manner which they did the ankle mobility, but now they'll lift their knee up toward their chest and toward the wall again for a count of 5 to 8. Then they'll repeat that to the left and to the right, trying to open up their hips and really getting good hip mobility. The jog and back pedal is the first exercise in the warm-up, and what it's geared for doing is increasing the body temperature and getting the blood flowing before we proceed to the rest of the workout. It's done over a distance of about 20 yards, and I have the athletes do this 2 times down and back. The side slide is the second exercise in the warm-up, and what this is geared to do is the same thing as the jog and back pedal, but it also warms us up for lateral movement as well. So with a side slide, they're going to shuffle across and back that same 20-yard distance and bring their arms over their head. So same thing as before, increase blood flow, get the body temperature going for the warm-up, but also to warm up laterally. The first exercise to develop general mobility is called the hip crossover progression. The athlete lies flat on their back with their feet in contact with the ground and will roll their knees from the left to the right. It's important that they keep the shoulders in contact with the ground the entire time as they perform this exercise. They'll go over and back for a count of 5 or 6 reps, and then they'll pull their knees up toward their chest, pulling their toes up with it, and perform the same exercise, moving their legs side to side. Now, it's very important to remember when you do this exercise that the athlete does not want to let their knees touch the ground. So keep good core stability and slide to the left and to the right with their knees. Leg overs is another exercise used to increase general mobility. This is done with the athlete lying on their back, and they're sweeping one leg across to their opposite hand. The athlete will then hold for a count of 5, then sweep their other leg back across to the opposite hand, and for another count of 5, and then repeat the sequence over and over again for about 10 or 11 reps. Another general mobility exercise is called scorpions. This is done with the athlete lying on their stomach, and the goal of this is to loosen up the hip flexor and low back area by lifting one leg up to the opposite hand. The athlete lifts up and across, holds for a count of 5 seconds, reaches up and across with their other leg for another 5 seconds, and then we'll repeat this in a faster motion. The athlete will repeat this about 10 or 15 times depending on how tight or loose their low back and hip flexors may feel. Press-ups is used to loosen up the hip flexors and the abdominal region. The athlete starts on their stomach, arches back, lifting their chest off the ground. Once the athlete does this, they're going to look behind them to the left and to the right. The child's pose is used to loosen up the low back and the hips of the athlete. This is performed by the athlete rocking back, bringing their butt back toward their heels. They can do this 1 or 2 times if they need be, or they can stay in place and pause for about a count of 10. The calf stretch most people are familiar with is when you push your heel toward the ground, just getting a nice long stretch in your calf muscle. Well, this often gets the job done. What we now know is that doing that type of exercise will pry muscle tissue away from the bone and can increase your possibility of injuring your calf by up to 20%. We've altered the calf stretch to where it doesn't cause this type of damage to the muscle tissue. How this exercise is executed is the athlete will pull their toe up toward their shin. That movement right there will cause the front muscle of the shin to contract, which will cause your calf to relax. This will make your heel appear as if it's going toward the ground. The athlete will then push back through the ground, extending, coming all the way up on their toe, and then repeat the sequence over and over again. So it's pulling the toe up and actively pushing through. Again, pulling the toe up and pushing through, which will cause the calf to loosen up. The elephant stretch is also geared toward developing general mobility. The athlete extends their arms completely out in front of them over their head. And what they're going to do is make 3 big circles to the right and 3 big circles to the left. So imagine one giant circle and have the athlete try and push outside of that circle, trying to get nice and elongated all the way out for the entire range of motion. Trunk twists, twisters, and helicopters are 3 different exercises, yet I have them together because they progress one to the next to the next. All 3 of the exercises require the athlete to relax their arms the entire time, so all of the motion is going to start from the hips. The athlete with the trunk twist starts to rotate their hips to the left and to the right, and their arms will follow suit, lifting away from the sides of their body. They move on to twisters, where the athlete will then take their heel off the ground, so actually start to pivot onto the balls of the feet. Again, the arms are relaxed, and the motion again is still coming from the hips. When we move on to the helicopters, the athlete takes it all the way down to a lunge, drives out of their legs, ensuring that they're keeping good posture, and their arms should still fly away from their body. Again, it's all about generating force from the ground up through the top of your body. Pendulums are used to increase blood flow to the shoulder area, something which is very important in the sport of softball. And this can be done with the athlete bending over at the waist. Now, when you do this exercise, you can use one arm or you can use both arms together. But make sure you start with smaller circles and then widen out to larger circles. This will help increase that blood flow a lot quicker. Arm circles forward and back are another exercise used to start to loosen up the shoulder area. And the athlete maintains good posture and keeps their arms nice and straight. We don't want to get bent or lazy with the arms here because it will defeat the purpose. So the athlete's going to bring their arms forward, sweeping up and across, pretty much brushing their ear with their bicep. And then they'll repeat that going backwards. Come forward again after a few 4, 5, 6 reps each arm, and then go back again for another 4, 5, or 6 reps.
This is Hug Yourself, Hug the World. It is an exercise which we use in general mobility to warm up the arms. It's also an exercise which gets progressively faster when the athlete executes it. So they'll start very slow with a deliberate hug to themselves, then move on to the next, which is a deliberate opening up, which is like they hug the world. And then they'll repeat that back and forth, increasing the speed at which they do it for about a set of 15 to 20 times. Alternating arm swings to a run, the athlete starts very long and very slow with the arms and eventually build up to where they're moving their arms as quick and as fast as they can, with their arms bent at 90 degrees and their hands moving right back through their pockets, mimicking actual perfect running mechanics of them on the base path or out of the box. This is another general mobility exercise used to also reinforce good running technique and proper form.
Heel-to-toe rocks works on loosening up the ankle joint. It's important to keep good posture throughout this whole exercise as the athlete comes all the way up on their toes and then rocks all the way back on their heels. Remember, posture is the key with this exercise, but don't lose sight of loosening up the ankle joint because that type of motion is going to help with running form. The heel-to-toe walk is another exercise used to loosen up the ankle joint. It kind of mimics the heel-to-toe rocking, but now we're taking it to more of a dynamic, more of a walking motion. So here the athlete is actually over-exaggerating the walk, starting on their heel, rocking all the way up on their toes as they move forward. Big things to look for here is not only good arm mechanics, making sure their arms are bent at 90 degrees, but also that they're keeping good posture as well. Cocky walks are also used to loosen up the ankle. And again, some of these motions here are very specific to the motions in running. Here, the athlete is never going to make contact on the ground with their heels. Instead, everything is going to make contact with the balls of the feet. Keeping good posture and keeping good arm mechanics in mind, the athlete pulls up your toe, snaps it down and lands on the ball of the foot, pushing off the ground, making them move forward in a walking motion. To loosen up the hamstrings, we use the straight leg march. The key of this exercise is to lift and extend, kicking one leg up toward the opposite hand. Things to look for here is good posture. Another thing to look for is that when the athlete kicks up one foot, the foot in contact with the ground lifts up, so now the athlete is on the ball of their foot. The inverted toe touch is another exercise used to loosen up the hamstrings. One extra benefit that this exercise will bring is balance and proprioception, which is a key component in reducing injuries. This exercise is performed with the athlete bending at the waist, lifting up one leg off the ground, and reaching both hands toward the foot in contact with the ground. Once the athlete touches the ground, they will stand back up and return to the upright position. Make sure that the athlete comes all the way up. A lot of times you'll find athletes staying bent at the waist and just kicking up with the leg behind them. The world's greatest stretch is a unique exercise where it opens up a lot of different things in the lower body: hips, quads, and hamstrings. This exercise is performed with the athlete taking one giant lunge forward. So if they step forward with their left leg, they're now going to support their body weight with their outside hand or right leg. Once they get into that lunge position where they're supporting their body weight, they're going to take the opposite arm and try and stick that elbow inside to their instep, really getting as close to the ground as possible. Not to worry though, if the athlete can't get down to the ground, they continue to work on this over a period of time, and over a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the athlete should gain more flexibility and get that whole forearm closer to the ground. After the athlete reaches all the way down and finishes that lunge, they're going to rock back, get a little more stretch in that hamstring, hold for a count of 2 or 3, and then repeat the stretch all over again. One more thing to keep an eye on is a lot of athletes will tend to rush this stretch. Make sure they take their time and really do a good job with it. With the high percentage of ACL injuries in female athletics, it's important for us as strength and conditioning professionals to try and control as many factors as possible. One thing we can control is the reflex, which causes the quad and the hamstrings to contract when decelerating the lower leg. The backward lunge will actually help reset that reflex, keeping that lower leg stable when the athlete is decelerating. It's an important thing to remember, though, that this will not prevent ACL injuries, but it will help decrease the likelihood of an athlete getting one.
The backward lunge is accomplished with the athlete taking a big step back. They then lunge down, bringing that back knee as close to the ground as possible without touching it. The athlete will then twist to their front leg side and arch back slightly to get a stretch through their oblique area. The athlete will then repeat that, making sure they don't take a break in between repetitions. You move from one lunge to the next. This will help with balance, proprioception, and injury prevention.
Heel to butt is used to warm up the quadricep muscles. This exercise is done by bringing your heel up to your butt. When you do that, you want to lift and extend off of the ball of your foot and then push your hips forward. This will allow you to move forward and will also cause your hip flexor and your quads to relax. One thing you want to keep an eye out for with this exercise is that the athlete keeps both their knees tight together. We don't want their legs to separate so that you have one leg flare out to the side. The leg cradle is used to warm up the hips. What you do in this exercise is you're going to support your ankle and your knee and pull your heel up toward your belly button. Keep good posture while doing this exercise and then lift and extend off of your ball of the foot. Take another step forward and lift up with the opposite leg, repeating the same steps over and over again. Again, make sure you keep good posture and pull that heel up toward that belly button to get those hips to open up. The knee hug to a drive is a great exercise not only for hip mobility, but also to reinforce proper running mechanics. Here, the athlete pulls their knee all the way up to their chest, lifting their knee up and toe up. Going to lift and extend off of the ball of the foot and then drive their leg down, extending and pushing through the ground for about 3 steps, working on arms, working on posture, and working on proper leg drive. The drop step march is an exercise used to loosen up the hips. The other thing it will do is mimic the drop step, which both infield and outfield will use as a part of the game. The athlete performs this exercise by lifting their toe up and knee up. Make sure that you keep your toe and heel right up underneath your butt as you swing your hip open. If your leg gets too far out in front, it's going to slow down the whole process. Once you lift your toe up and knee up, swing your hip open like a gate, then reach back and repeat with the other foot. The drop step skip is another exercise to loosen up the hips. It's almost just like the drop step march, but more dynamic. So here the athlete is skipping and hopping back, trying to open up the hip as quick and as fast as possible while covering ground. The drop step lunge is used to open up the hips further. This exercise is pretty complex, so you want to make sure your athletes are executing this properly. This exercise with an athlete taking a big step back with one foot. Once they take that step back, they're going to squat down and get as low as the ground as possible where they can touch their hands to the ground. The athlete then resets and stands up, takes a step back with the same foot, and will do this for about 6 reps. After that, the athlete will return back to the line, stepping back with the opposite foot for another 6 reps. The side lunge is used to open up the groin area as well as the hips. Here, the athlete takes a step to the side, making sure both toes are pointing straight ahead. The athlete then sits their hips back, going into a lunge position. After completing that lunge position, the athlete takes a slight step back, keeping their feet just a little wider than shoulder width apart. Then they squat back down. This will further open up the hips. Once they do that, they'll take another step to the side, working on opening up the groin, again making sure both toes are pointing straight ahead and both feet stay in contact with the ground. The athlete will perform anywhere from 4 to 5 of these one direction and then go back the other direction, repeating the same number of lunges to that side. The reach run has been integrated into the warm-up because it aids in speed development. If you look at a reach run, it is actually perfect running mechanics, but backwards. So the athlete is trying to reach back as far as they can and cover as much ground as possible. This will help in the speed development process for the athlete, as well as the warm-up. The karaoke plays an important role in the warm-up as it mimics multi-directional movement. Hip rotation is a key component in all aspects of softball, and karaoke will help make sure that you're getting your hips warmed up properly. Often you'll see athletes just step across their body and not have any rotational movement at all at the hips, which really defeats the purpose of the exercise. So keep a close eye on your athlete and make sure their hips are turning each direction.
Ankle skips are a dynamic movement that we use to really activate the nervous system and to reinforce proper running mechanics. Focus on the athlete's arms here, as you want to make sure they have good arm mechanics with their arms bent at 90 degrees. As they skip, you want to make sure the athlete hops on each foot 2 times, reacting to the ground as quickly as possible and then changing feet. Ankle flips, you'll notice, are very similar to ankle skips. The only difference here is ankle skips, you hopped on each foot twice. With ankle flips, you only have 1 ground contact per foot. So it's quicker, it's more dynamic. Still the same rules apply: good posture, good arm mechanics. One other note for ankle flips is that you want to make sure all the movement comes from the ankle joint, so that you're pulling your toe up and snapping it down, ensuring that you land on the ball of the foot. High knee skips is a dynamic exercise used to further warm up the hip flexors and activate the nervous system. With this, you want to keep good posture and make sure the athlete stays nice and reactive to the ground. So they're going to skip their leg up, drive it down as quick as possible, and get the other leg up. Speed and frequency is key here, so make sure the athletes are moving quick and fast and staying dynamic. Short skips are just a very, very smaller variation of the high knee skip. So we're staying low to the ground, working our feet as fast as possible, staying on the balls of the feet. So don't lose sight of posture and don't lose sight of arm mechanics, for these things are very important for the execution of this exercise as well. A rapid response to a run is a very dynamic exercise, which also puts a lot of neural fatigue on the athlete. So the athlete is moving their feet up and down as quick as possible for 4 to 6 seconds. Then when you say go, the athlete will explode off the line, take 3-4 hard steps forward, and sprint across a 10-yard distance. The rapid response backwards to a run focuses on the same types of things as the forward, except now we're creeping backwards as our feet are moving as quick as possible. Once we hold the athlete here for another 4 to 6 seconds, we'll say go, and the athlete will still run forward, exploding out for 3 to 4 hard steps, covering that 10-yard distance.